One of the big things that really motivated me to start doing advocacy was the idea that I saw so many males struggling in the shelter system, looking for resources, and really nobody caring about that. And just starting interacting with other people that have been impacted by different systems, I start hearing like a lot of stories. I was like, well, we are not that different. It's just that now I have made peace with what happened to me. Like,
Yeah, so what do you think it means to be a good man? We are really excited to introduce Christian. We talked maybe a year and a half, a little bit ago.
Not sure. I think that it was longer.
Longer, maybe a little longer.
Yes.
And it was an incredible conversation. And prior to having all this great infrastructure for super high quality video and audio. So we're doing a refresh, some of the some same topics, some new ones, but we're just really excited. So I would love for you to introduce yourself, both to me and new to the audience, because I'm excited if we're gonna dive into today.
Perfect. Yes. And before I say my name, I think that it's interesting because I think that we're going to talk about masculinity and all these topics. But I remember that after our interview, I was like, was that enough? And I think that it's really arising from all the topics that we're going to talk today. But before we jump in, so my name is Cristian Eduardo. I'm originally from Mexico. I have been living here in New York City for almost 9 years. I am a survivor of human trafficking and other forms of abuse and violence. I'm an advocate for immigrants, LGBTQ plus rights, and I do training and technical assistance on human trafficking on a local level, state, and federal. I do a lot of consultancy with nonprofits, really focus on preventing gender-based violence and addressing it. And also I'm the co-founder of Mujeres and Resistencia, that it's a woman in resistance, that we really focus on educating and really giving information to the Latino Spanish-speaker community about what is gender-based violence and really connecting them through accessible and free resources.
It's amazing. And we are going to make sure to link to your work, your organizations, and any recommendations you have for resources, because I know you compile a lot of that and will be really helpful for listeners and members of our audience who can relate to those populations. So
absolutely. Yes.
We'll definitely link all that. So I guess let's start at the highest level, because our podcast is really about exploring masculinity, what it means to our viewers, and sharing perspectives on what that means. So I'm curious what it means to you, both as the word and as an identity.
Yes. So I think that different parts of me have different meanings around masculinity. I think that from the social justice advocate and the part of me that is really working with community that cares about the world, I will say that masculinity is a label, a category, like to really suppress the power of communities and the collective. I have seen that even if we have now this tendency of talking about like healthy masculinity, toxic masculinity, at the end is really a label and a category that really just diminish the power of people and how we can have an impact in the world. And I would say that as myself, masculinity is a part of you. It's a part of their identity. I think that a lot of times as men, we forget about that. I think that we put masculinity as the pinnacle of our beings. And it's like, this is the only thing that really defines me. And it's all these roles or all these stereotypes that we have been taught, that it have been passed through generations about how males should act, portray, behave, and interact, not only with yourself, but also with those around you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm curious how in your journey through life, your identity pulls from these different important parts of your identity. How do you stay true to yourself amidst the tension and the friction that you might be feeling from societal or familial pressures?
Yeah, I think that that's a really good question. I think that everybody would love like an answer that is like, here are the 3 steps like to keep yourself true or like navigate all these things. The reality is that I keep myself real to myself by struggling. I think that that's the main thing. Struggling, being vulnerable, questioning myself. And I think that even if I say it, it is very hard. We haven't created spaces for, especially for males and men, to navigate all these things. We are afraid of being vulnerable. We're afraid of like struggling because we have been told like you cannot struggle. You should have all the answers. And a lot of times I find myself just in the midst of that. Like I actually don't know what to do. I actually don't know how to behave. I'm actually don't know what is happening around me because it's so ingrained masculinity and how you engage with society, with your loved ones, with community, at your work, even just walking around. I think that it is so ingrained that we just forget about it and we assume that it's, oh, this is just the way that I was born, instead of really asking ourselves like, is this really the way that I was born, or somebody start talking about all this and start like putting all these ideas in my mind. So I would say that it's a struggling, questioning myself. I think that it's a big part. Why am I behaving this way? Why do I like certain things? Why do I interact in certain ways with people? Why do I interact differently when I'm only surrounded by females than by males? Or when I'm on LGBTQ plus spaces? I think that that's a big thing. I know that it's hard, but there's no shortcut. There's really, it's a struggling asking yourself. And I know that especially right now, a lot of us, like we are dealing with work, the political environment and all these things, but also if we don't heal those parts of ourselves that has been passed through generations, we're just going to continue with this idea that masculinity is the only thing that we have as males.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love how you phrased it as a struggle, because it is work, right? It is work to question yourself. Why do I maybe have these behaviors, or how do they change as the environment changes around me or the people change around me? And it's a good reminder to embrace that friction, because it's so easy. Like the path of least resistance is always just to fit in, right? But then you're just sacrificing so much on that super easy path. And so it's a good reminder. Everything in life that is worth it takes work. Being healthy takes work. Your career takes work. Family, relationships, all those things that are worth it take work. And this is just another example of that.
Yes, and I think that it's very important also. I have a really good friend who I work with that we trained all across the United States. And we really train around trauma, victims and survivors, and how to interact with them. And it's very interesting because I see a lot of connections. A lot of times we just want to talk about solutions. A lot of times we just want to talk about like how to solve it, but we don't want to go through the struggle. And I see this example, like even myself going to therapy, myself taking medication for HIV, myself like even learning English, I needed like to go through the struggle. And I think that is very similar, really recognizing what is masculinity, how it impacts your life, how has impacted past generations, and where are we going forward. And we need to talk about the struggle. We need to talk about the pain in order to heal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so those questions about masculinity, those are a lot of the core under the hood questions that we like to ask everyone. But what I really want to dive in on, given your work and your expertise and your knowledge, is around sexual violence and trauma and trafficking. Could you share a bit more just about the work that you do generally? And then I would love to get into some questions.
Yes, of course. So most of the time when we talk about human trafficking, when we talk about domestic violence, intimate violence partner, when we talk about sexual violence, immediately we assume that it can only be kids, uh, most of the time like girls and women. By default, we have been programmed, we have been told that male cannot uh, face or went through all these experiences. So big part of my job is really educating not only community members but legislators, and it can be from city councils and other Congress people around like what is gender-based violence, how it impacts our communities, not only women and girls. I think that it's very important to emphasize that they are mainly impacted, but a lot of times what we forget is that boys and men can also be impacted too. And the most important thing that I would want to bring around training, really educating everyone, is that gender-based violence doesn't discriminate. You just need to be human. You just need to be vulnerable. You just need to have needs, and that's a lot of times is gonna be taken advantage of by some abuser or some perpetrator, some trafficker. So that's a big part of the work that I do. I also do a lot of work on policies and legislation about, in the sense that how pieces of legislation or laws are going to impact our communities and survivors who have experienced that. Another big part of the work that I do is how can we create environments that are more inclusive. Not, and when I say inclusive, it's not only for the LGBTQ plus community, but also for men and boys. Most of the resources in all across the United States are designed only for girls and women. Even if you are able to recognize that you have gone through sexual violence, that you have gone through physical violence, financial violence, or financial abuse, there are no resources for you, or the resources are not tailored for men and boys. So that's also part of my job. And one other big part of my job that I really like to highlight is peer support. A lot of time, I'm very open about living with HIV, being a gay man, just in case that nobody has noticed or don't have an idea, and also about mental health. So what I have seen is that this was an unintended consequence, especially in social media. I'm trying to create all these environments, to safe environments, to talk about it, share information. And one thing that I never thought or never crossed my mind is that a lot of males have reached out. I don't know how to navigate an STI because, of course, we have never we don't talk about sex education. I don't know what to do if I'm diagnosed HIV positive. I don't know how to navigate if I'm suffering from depression, anxiety, if I have had or if I'm currently navigating any situation of abuse or violence. I have seen that this is a huge need that we have, and it's something that it's more common that we think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's like, as you mentioned, by the numbers, because gender-based violence is geared towards more women. It ignores and leaves behind the men and boys who have been affected by it. And just because there's fewer doesn't mean you can leave behind a population like that. So I'm curious, you mentioned the scarce resources. I'm wondering if you could help explain maybe what's out there, and then maybe in like a more ideal state of the world, what good might look like.
Yes, the reality is that, I really like to explain this when with personal experience. After my trafficking situation that I didn't know it was trafficking, I just left my trafficking situation. I found myself with no home, no friends, no family here, no job. And this was really hitting on me as, but I am a male. I'm supposed to be doing all these things. So I cannot look for support. I cannot look says that a lot of people think that it's only for women. It's family justice centers that is actually address all forms of abuse and violence. So if you are in need of resources, there are really a lot of organizations. I would say that think about any organization that is providing services to female, and very likely they are already providing services for male. There is this transition happening that a lot of organizations are being aware that, wait, males are not only perpetrators, males are not only abusers, but males are also victims and survivors. So there are a lot of resources. One of the big resources that I would like to share with everyone is 9AA for prevention of suicide. Suicide, depression, and anxiety are very real. It's not tied with how masculine you are. It's not tied with I'm weak. I'm supposed to not be struggling with my mental health. Mental health is real. Anxiety is real. Depression is real. I myself, I go to therapy every week. I take medication to support my mental health. I even see a psychiatrist. And I mean, some people would say, like, yes, you are crazy. Probably I'm crazy, but also it's because I care about myself. And the same way that I care about others and the same way that I want to continue showing myself for others, we need to do it to ourselves. So don't be afraid to ask for support, for help. And there are a lot of resources. 9AA, again, this is very real. If you have ever think that just suddenly are losing interest in things, you don't have the energy to do it. There are men and boys are big impacted by depression and suicide. So this is a conversation that we must have, and a lot of times we just talk about it when we lost someone. So there's out there, again, the human trafficking hotline, the domestic violence national hotline, 9AA for suicide and depression, and all other resources like in New York, family justice centers and organizations that are specifically for domestic violence, human trafficking. They also serve males and boys.
Mm-hmm. And we'll link all those. And I just think, if nothing else, having that message of you saying, like, to someone listening with this, it's not your fault and there are resources and people want to help is such a critical message, because there aren't many spaces and places where you can just hear that simple message, right? And it's so important to support those who have been affected, and the way that it intersects with masculinity makes seeking help harder. And so just getting that message out there over and over and over again, that it is possible and there is a way through. And it ties back to your first comment on struggle, right? It is hard work, but it's worth it because it's for yourself and it's for caring about yourself.
Absolutely, and I really want, like, for all men and boys that are watching us, you are worthy. Do not diminish, do not minimize your experiences. I hear a lot about this because I'm very open about my living with HIV, being a survivor of human trafficking. I see how a lot of times men, especially around my age, they are like, but I didn't struggle as you. I haven't suffered as much as you. So I'm not sure if I should receive help. There's nothing like that. The reality is that we all live in this world. We are all humans. We all are vulnerable. We all have been impacted by trauma, and we all deserve the support and the resources. And we all are worthy of healing.
Mm-hmm. I guess for motivation for taking on some of this self work, what are some of the ways that trauma can impact how someone expresses or suppresses their emotions?
I would say that especially on males, it's being violent. I think, and it's interesting because masculinity itself says or tell us that aggression, dominance, it's a natural trait for us. And a lot of times we need to really ask ourselves, like, why am I being so aggressive? What is my role on trying to be dominant? Or a lot of times because there are no spaces to disclose trauma, this really, we perpetuate those circles of trauma. A lot of times we try to normalize all these situations that we have gone through or we have experienced, and because we don't have spaces for healing, we don't have spaces to talk about this, we just replicate it because it is our normal. A lot of times, childhood abuse, domestic violence when being a child. These are very, very common topics that I hear in the community, especially talking about men and boys. And we don't talk about this. A lot of times when I'm doing public speaking and all these things, a lot of people approach me and it's like, I never thought that males could go through this. When I'm talking about sexual violence, sex trafficking, and I'm shocked because this shows how masculinity doesn't only impact males, but a society as a whole. A lot of times people are like, oh, it's the first time that I'm meeting a survivor. And I'm always telling people, like, very likely no, but survivors, male survivors and victims, we don't have spaces to talk about this. And even in between friends, even in between other males, we joke about it. If someone tries to disclose, it's like, oh, that happened a long time ago, come on. Or even it's one of the sad things about sexual violence is that we tied it around, if you're a male and you have encountered or faced sexual violence, the fear of being seen as gay or as feminine or not able to protect yourself outweighed the need for support, care, and love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's so many interconnections, and I think vulnerability is a big piece of that because it's really asking for help seems like you're publicizing that fact. But like you mentioned, it can happen to anyone, particularly in vulnerable states. And it doesn't discriminate based on gender, right? And so the negative components of gender being male is that the structures around the victims make it difficult to seek help, right? And so that's why conversations like this are so important for normalizing that pathway to seeking help and really seeing it as like a powerful step. Like it's harder work to do this, but it's so worth it. And so it's like reframing that like weakness to strength. Like I'm doing work, I'm caring about myself, and this is necessary to do.
Yes, and I think that also it's worth mentioning that all males, we have our definition of masculinity because we are living in a society. There are gender roles, and I think that we need to do a lot of work around it. But we have, as an individuals, like a definition of masculinity, or so it's very, very important to notice that also if you are a victim, a survivor, or you have faced any form of abuse and violence, that doesn't take away any masculinity from you. It's very, very important. One, I think that the core elements of masculinity is victim blaming. It's always like, oh, it was your fault. You weren't able to protect yourself. You weren't strong enough. You're a male. You should be the role model. You cannot make mistakes. You cannot fall through the gaps. Like everything. It's always one of the core elements of masculinity is victim blaming. And I think that that's why it's so hard also for males and boys to speak out. Because the answer of speaking out around emotions, abuse, because it's rooted in victim blaming, it's going to be more abuse from other males. It's like, oh, we don't want to hear about that. That's nothing that it's happening. And a lot of times what I see is that these people who engage in this victim blaming as males also, they also have some background really rooted around like sexual violence or any other form of abuse. And it's very, very important to talk about this. Never minimize anybody's experience. I think that that's a huge, huge thing that we need to start changing.
Yeah. I think the minimizing goes both ways. I think the victim as a self-defense mechanism, as minimizing for themselves as kind of a form of denial almost, that it wasn't that bad. I don't need to open up this can and feel these emotions, which is totally understandable. They're scary, awful emotions. And then for those receiving, they don't want to feel those emotions either. And so they minimize towards the victim. So the conversation never happens. And the healing never happens. And then the other point I wanted to make, which connected to what you were saying earlier, is that the other reason this healing is so important is because it's not just you, it's the cycle, and that those who have experienced violence like this, as you mentioned, are often the ones who perpetrate it, because that violence and aggression is the accepted form of like emotional display often for men. So it just comes out as that one lane, as opposed to all the different nuanced ways that healing should actually show up as.
No, and it's true. And I would really, I don't want to sound nerd or like, but I really like sharing like some book recommendations. Talking about this, that it's not only about us. There's one really good book. It's called It Didn't Start With You, that it calls about intergenerational trauma. And it's not something that is like, it's in your mind, that is like, it's only your mental health, but it's really talking about the genetics, how trauma impact, and how if it's not healed, it get passed down on generations. So I remember that the first time that I was reading, I was like, well, if I'm being honest with myself, I was like, well, this makes sense now. Like in my family, like it's not only my generation, but my parents' generation, like all these gender norms, all this trauma that I haven't healed, that actually it was the reactions of it. Like I am struggling with them. And now if I think that the first step is being aware of it. And I think that it's very scary, because it's like, oh, wow, like how many people I have been harming? Have I been harming myself? And I think that it's totally okay. But if we really want to heal ourselves, also we need to heal those, and it's not your responsibility to heal your loved ones, but we also heal not only as individuals, but in community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the other phrasing I've kind of been toying with is accountability is such a masculine ideal. And so it's really taking accountability for, even though it was not your fault, it is a part of your past and you have an opportunity to work on it. And so that's a framing that's not weak. Accountability is such a masculine ideal and it's really following that.
Yes, and I think that a lot of times it really depends with which lens we are seeing accountability, because we see accountability like going to prison, being isolated from community, not allowing ourselves to engage with relationships. Now I have harm, it means that I'm going to harm my whole life. But accountability is really recognizing the harm that we have been doing, and also where is it coming from? Because it's not like, oh, I just harm because like it give me happiness. And a lot of times that's what I like really to bring this trauma approach, because there's a lot of story behind. I feel that a lot of times we males portray ourselves, especially masculinity, as like, yes, like the loudest one, the ones screaming, the one showing the war, that I own the war. But in reality, we silence our internal voices. We silence our struggles. We really silence the realities that we are facing every single day. So, and it really resonates what you say to me, that it goes both ways. I think that we use the sound to get away from all these feelings, from all these things that we are experiencing, and saying like, oh, you see, it's not affecting me. But that's what masculinity is telling you to do. And I think that that's why we need to explore what is masculinity, how masculinity impact your life, and how it's also preventing you from healing.
Mm-hmm. Connected to this healing, I think another barrier is that there needs to be safe ways to do this exploring, because it is really challenging. And the reason we avoid it is because it's difficult. And sometimes people aren't in a safe environment to explore that, either for their own mental health. It's not the right time to dive in. So what kind of guidance can you give on like, where is a healing space for guys to do this? How can community and peers help with like step zero, like the very first thing where I want to start exploring this. I feel ready in my mental health to start doing this hard work, and I want to find a safe way to do this. That's not just approaching someone random where you're not sure about the reaction, which could be negative.
I really like this question because right now I think that in the world that we are living, I have seen these boot camps where it's like, heal your man self, become men again, like get your power back and all these things. It's very different to trigger, detonate, release, open the door of something. If you go to the street, yell at another male, of course it's gonna get triggered. Probably it's gonna yell at you, or it's gonna try to defend themselves. All these things, like it's not the same to release, trigger, and open the gate than to create the space to keep it open and see what is inside. It's very, very easy. One of the big things that I warn all boys and male is that all these boot camps, all these spaces that are saying like, in 3 days, you're going to heal your intergenerational trauma. Like I'm 34. I'm like, to your 34 years of like trauma that is 100% false. What they are doing is just they're going to trigger you. And of course, it's going to resonate with you because like, oh, I'm having this space. Of course, that is 100% sure. But the problem is not that. The problem is that you open the door and now you don't have the space to talk about this. Now it's going to impact your life. And the long-term consequence is that you are going to need to close that door by yourself again. And I think that is really, really painful. So I will say that for everyone trying to explore what is masculinity, what is toxic masculinity, that I still struggle around this because I think that is kind of creating the binary again about like, okay, but you need to be this good man. Still, I think that's a whole conversation. Just starting by really taking care about yourself. And taking care about yourself is not just sleeping, eating. That's also a form of taking care of yourself, but it's really sitting with yourself, being uncomfortable, and ask yourself, what am I feeling? What are my needs? What do I need to do to keep myself going? One of the big things that I see right now is that males, we just keep going. It's like, it doesn't matter how much I'm struggling, I'm just keep going. So I think that's the first step. The other part is really, again, we're going back to the beginning of this conversation. It's the hard work. I think that educating yourself, there are, again, be careful with these boot camps that are like, just in 1 day, in 10 hours, in 5 hours, whatever. But there are a lot of groups, online groups, community groups. I would say that one of the big things that we need to do as males is exposing ourselves to other communities, to other activities. And this can be volunteering, like going to things that our masculinity is telling us like, oh, we shouldn't do this. We shouldn't dance. Like, I found it very interesting for me how a lot of males don't dance because it's like, that's a feminine thing. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like what? Like that? I don't know. I mean, I'm 34 and still I don't know that there's like music is not telling you like, oh, hi, I'm masculine, I'm feminine, or I'm like you cannot hear me because you're a male, like or you shouldn't move your body because you're a male. I think that all this we can start like that, really questioning how we are engaging with the world and really exposing, again, ourselves to different cultures, to other communities, the LGBTQ+ community. One of the big things and that I see is that, and it's very interesting for me that a lot of males don't want to engage with the LGBTQ+ community because out of fear. And I'm like, out of fear of what? Like, what is going to happen that you are going to feel that you want to dance, maybe? Like, that is going to challenge your masculinity, that you have maybe deeper conversations around why somebody's wearing long earrings, like, is that really like what your struggle about, or it's really because it's challenging some core values that you have? So I would say that doing that community work, like a little bit of self-education, and really taking care of yourself, recognize your needs, and ask for support. I know that this sounds so cliche. This sounds like, oh yes, everybody's doing this. I would say that also be careful with life coach. One of the big things that I have seen in the community is that also life coach are like, I'm gonna heal you. I'm gonna just trust your gut, to be honest. And I think that finding groups where other males want to do disengagement, where other males want to be vulnerable, when other males want to share, I think that that's how you start this work. Mm-hmm. And the path looks different from everyone. I'm always telling people that you don't need to go to therapy. You can be maybe learning by reading, by going to other spaces, by listening to victims and survivors of any gender that they are, by volunteering, by engaging with nature. I think that those are really a lot of things that we do a lot of times from a lens of masculinity. It's like, I'm not engaging in this because I want to enjoy it, but rather to show that I'm successful.
Yeah, I think to sum it up, what I'm hearing you say is that the first step is the introspection and kind of understanding what you're feeling and what you're needing. And then from there, the path can be different. And then even when you're on the path, to be very cognizant and wary of how you're feeling with kind of poking certain triggers, and check in on your mental health. Like, am I ready for this work? Is this too fast? And for some people, it could be starting as simple as like a nature walk. And for others, it could be like a long retreat, and where you're like totally diving in, and then everything in the middle, from like finding men's groups or men's work mm-hmm. on I don't know, Facebook groups, or one-on-one therapy, or like a conversation with like a trusted friend. Or I love the idea of just, if you don't have that network, you build it by doing new things, volunteering in a community that's completely different from yours, even totally passive online research on YouTube, looking for stories that are similar to yours, where you're not talking to anyone, it's totally private, and you're just listening and seeing, hey, that story sounds like me. This person is online talking about it. They're in a position of strength. They've done the work. That means I can do it too. So I think those avenues are super diverse, and you can kind of tailor your path depending how you feel and where you are in your mental health.
You know that I like something that you say. I think that a lot of times, and this is totally, I would say that another core value of masculinity is don't change. There's no need to change. The world should adjust to you. And we need to stop shaming men that are trying to change. It's one of the big things that I see when men are researching about, like, what is patriarchy, what is privilege, what is oppression, and when I have seen a lot of males that are like, oh, okay, I'm getting it, and I see a lot of times, and this can be like men, woman, people who have been in spaces like this for so long. It's like, oh no, like it's the minimum that you should do. It's like, no, like, recognize that, stop the shaming, because if we continue shaming, we are adhering to this norm that is the patriarchy is telling us, like, because patriarchy is going to come and say, oh, you see, why do you want to change if you're going to be ashamed? Why do you want to change if everyone is going to tell you that you're guilt? So I think that a lot of times, and I have seen it happen in a lot of spaces, men get discouraged from engaging, interacting, or even asking questions. I think that for the people who are leading this work, for the leaders that are like creating these spaces, also it's very worth mentioning that we need to be aware of how we are impacting other males. And I think that, again, this is ingrained because a lot of times we don't recognize this. I see how a lot of times we recognize these interactions between someone leading and when it's a victim or a survivor, or someone leading and it's a woman and a male. We can see those like those power imbalance, but a lot of times we don't see it when it's coming from a male to a male. We do this passive aggressive, like shaming, guilt tripping. Is like, oh, that's all that you know. Like, let me tell you that there's more. Like, well, yes, we are all struggling, and we probably are gonna arrive there. But if we engage in these behaviors, we won't arrive to nowhere.
Yeah, and I think there's also not just an individual defensiveness to not changing. I think there's a collective defensiveness too, and I would, because I understand the reaction when you hear, and I see this a lot just in the discussions online and in comments when there's questions about masculinity, trying to investigate deeper or learn more, or even criticize different components of it. There's an initial reaction of defensiveness to like, oh, you're trying to throw everything out. You're trying to tear it all down. And I think it should really just pose the question of like self-betterment. Like, why can't we analyze this? Why shouldn't we investigate further if it's going to make you a better person, right? Like you can make your own judgment as you get to these questions of like, oh, I like this, I'm going to keep this. This works for my life, or this doesn't work. I'm not going to live by this. But to completely throw it all out and reject it and say, I'm not going to investigate this, I'm not going to dig any deeper, everything's perfect as it is, that's probably baseline like ignorance to ignore it, right? And so there is the onus to do the investigation, to ask the questions, and then once you're there, you can come up with your own answers. But I think getting past that initial defensiveness to even get to the investigation of what does masculinity mean to me, what parts of my identity are am I just simply adopting from other places that don't serve me? Like that can only help you, or which parts of it are actually authentic. That can only help you. So don't. I guess I would just caution listeners to not knee-jerk reaction like, oh, this is just blank criticism. No, this is just prompting to investigate further and figure out what serves you.
Yeah, and I think that also one of the big, I would say that challenges for masculinity is curiosity. If you're not curious to learn, to ask, to hear from different perspectives, and I think that applies to both sides. That there are not really sides, but those that we feel that we are more educated about masculinity, and I have issues saying that still. But I think that if you know a little bit more, or if you have resources, share them. You don't gain nothing proving that you know more about masculinity or how is it impacting the world by telling others like, oh, like this is masculinity, it's impacting people. I think that we all have that sense, but if we don't engage in curiosity, like instead of like, as you were saying, like being critical, like, oh no, you're diminishing all theories and we all pass that. Like, oh, I would like to hear more about it. Or have you ever read about this resource? And I think I really have seen if we engage with this curiosity and be like, oh, like maybe you don't know. And I mean, also there's people who don't have good intentions around this, and also it's totally fine. I think that one of the big things is that once you remove the veil for masculinity, you start seeing a lot of things. And a lot of times it's your own defense mechanism saying like, oh my, it's everywhere. Like it's literally everywhere. Like I have been engaging on this. Nobody knows about this. Everybody needs to know about it. Like that's not your work, to be honest. Like I think that that's why it's so important to have support systems, to be part of a community, because if masculinity also does that. Like, I feel that it has like all these roots that is like, oh, you're trying to find me by yourself. Like, let me tell you, that's not gonna be possible. So also, I wanna everyone who is listening to really understand that, and it makes sense because their roots are already expanded. So even if you try to challenge it, a lot of times the roots are the ones who are speaking rather than the people who's trying to change.
Yeah, the community aspect is really important to see and understand different perspectives, and then, like you said, it's not a knowledge game for who has read more or thought more about this. It's just the fact that you've even prompted or begun it itself is the important thing. I want to jump back to your advocacy work. I'm curious. I'm curious. Have conversations in your own community started as a result of your work, and how do those go? Like, how does your advocacy work come up against your family life, your friend life? What do those conversations look like?
I think that one of the biggest challenges when I started doing advocacy, I felt that I needed to come out of the closet like 5 times. I was like, oh, my family, I was assuming that my family didn't know that I was gay. Like, probably like some people would be like, oh, yes, but it's obvious that you're gay. Like, I don't know. In my mind, it wasn't obvious. That was the main barrier. The second barrier was like, oh, wow, I now need to disclose that I'm a survivor of human trafficking. Now I need to disclose that I'm living with HIV. Now I need to disclose that I'm an immigrant. And I was like, oh, like, okay, this is becoming like worse, like with the time. But one of the big things that really motivated me to start doing advocacy, it was the idea that I saw so many males struggling in the shelter system, looking for resources, and really nobody caring about that. And just starting interacting with other people that have been impacted by different systems, I start hearing like a lot of stories. I was like, well, we are not that different. It's just that now I have made peace with what happened to me. Like, and but a lot of males are going through a lot of experiences around abuse, violence, and they ever think about it. They never phantom about like me, a victim, a survivor. How come? Like, look, I'm this masculine, I'm strong, I'm successful, and it's like, well, yes, like those things can coexist. And also, it was just this idea that because I remember that when I was, since I was a kid, I think that I have this idea that it was weird to me because I never fit in the gender norm. I never liked football. I don't know. I was good in school, but that wasn't enough. So I was always questioning like why males in a specific treat me so different than women because women feel to welcome me, and I was like, this doesn't make sense. Like I'm a male. So I think that I have found that that this story is more common than I thought. I was the only one. I was like, I'm isolated. Nobody wants to talk about this. But just this idea that I went through all these things alone, that I didn't have nobody to talk about, ask about it, that I was like, is it okay to feel sad? Is it okay to think about that I don't want to wake up tomorrow or like that I want to engage with this world? Is that something that everyone struggles? And just thinking about how hard it was and how the society and everyone, even close people to me, were like, but you're a male, you can do it. I think that that was so painful that that's why I started doing the advocacy work. I was like, I want men and boys, young adults, kids, all adults to know that it is actually not okay to go through all this by yourself. And it's painful, it's unfair, and I don't want other people that have gone through, especially like males that are struggling or that have struggled in the past, just to take that pain and throw it on the side. I think that was my big motivation, and it's still my big motivation. I have seen how really sharing that all the stories, all these interconnections, that but I'm still here. That doesn't mean that struggling is the end, but like also looking for support and validating all your experiences is also valid. I think that has a huge impact on boys and males.
Mm-hmm. And in your story and your personal experience, given the struggle you saw in front of you, what kind of gave you the strength to do the work on yourself to get to where you are now? Like what was really driving you to do the work and face this and not, like you said, just throw it on the side and push on?
I think that, to be honest, I think that, and it's interesting, I think that in part was just my will to live. That I think that we really diminish it. Like we really minimize it. Like how even if we are struggling, if we are facing like horrendous things in our life, we still decide to wake up. We still decide to work, to go to work. We still decide to watch that sport game. We still decide like to play video games. We still decide to take a shower. And we oftentimes, as males, we minimize that so much because we associate just living with a responsibility rather than a full experience of life. So I think that was a big part, my will to live. And also, I think that untangling that I was worthy of the work because even if we like to see or not, we all have been doing a lot of work for ourselves. To have that job, to show off where everyone is like mean to you, in this world where everyone is silencing males, like you cannot cry, you cannot be this way. I think that we are doing it at the end because we know, even a lot of times if it's very deep, that we're worthy of continue and we're worthy of like support, love, and I know that as males we don't like this kind of words or we're a little bit uncomfortable, but it is true. We all have it inside us, that part of us that take care about us, that really love us, and that keep going on. And I think that was the part that I really discovered. And also it has been the part that has like challenging me around masculinity.
And in the advocacy work, is it, are you trying to bring out a similar motivation, or is it more like I'm sharing my story so that they can see my path as an example? Like how do you get the first couple steps in the advocacy work to help those who need it?
One of the main goals is to really create awareness. I have seen it in a lot of spaces, especially when I'm advocating for males and boys who are victims and survivors. I see how a lot of times these spaces people came and it's like, so you're saying that we should reduce services for women and girls? And I'm like, I never say that. I never say that. What I'm saying is that we need more support. We need to invest around like how males and boys are impacted by all these issues, and we need to expand on services and expand that compassion not only for women and girls but also to boys and males. And also I think that big piece that I'm always bringing is accountability. Like it's not only that we need to keep males accountable, we need to keep humans accountable. Like we are all humans, and like if you harm other people, you can have like a very robust background, but there must be accountability because we cannot just give you a free pass like, oh, because of your trauma experiences, like you're gonna. And I think that's a big part, that created awareness of males and boys, victims and survivors, male victimization, that we deserve and we need services. The other part is making communities, making spaces vulnerable so they can look for support. Because the reality is that I'm not looking to just listen to boys and males struggling. My main goal is that okay, now that you're aware of it, like you deserve support. It's not that this is gonna be a one-side conversation when I'm gonna hear it, but you can actually take steps like to take care of yourself and like to validate your experience and I don't know, to look for the support that you deserve. And this can look at several ways, like from contacting law enforcement, looking for supports, get therapy, like finally healing that maybe younger part of yourself, connecting with other parts of you. And I think that the last part is really showing and educating everyone that you don't need to live hell or like struggle like horrendous like things to validate your experience in this world. I think that that's a very, very big piece. And even if for some people one experience doesn't impact the way that you think, maybe that experience impacted you so much that you're still thinking about it. So I think that that's really my main goal. And just also really connecting to people, showing that males, we can also connect with other people, that it's totally fine, that you can do it at your pace, and that really it's something that we can all engage in.
Yeah, I think it's a good point about validating the experiences that might not be as severe as possible, right? Because a lot of times I think like media glorifies the most extreme survivorship stories, and the survivors are the only ones celebrated at that level. But it doesn't mean that your experiences for something that may have been less severe aren't worthy of the work. So I think that's a really good call to action to not ignore, I don't know, something that might not make TV, because that's often the only time we see survivors discussing and how they got through it. You also mentioned your younger self. So I'm curious, given all the work you've done and are still doing right now, like, do you communicate or resonate with your younger self? Like, what do you say?
Yes, no, a lot. I think that I mean, and I feel that I should get paid for this, but I'm always telling people like, look out for what is internal family systems. That changed my, I don't know, at least my perspective. Maybe it doesn't work for everyone, but it's talking about like how we have different parts. And for me, it makes a lot of sense, because I feel that a lot of times it's a part of me that is like trying to keep up with masculinity, but there's another part of me that is like, well, who set up those standards? So, and I think that we are all very familiar with this. We're always talking about like our kid version of ourselves, that it's really a part of us. And I think that this has been a huge part for me, because really I feel, and I know that as males, a lot of times when we see our mistakes, when we see our experiences, when we see the paths that we have walked, we judge ourselves from the adult one that has more knowledge, more experience, that have lived more time. And we are like, how stupid of me, how fool I was. And the reality is that, no, we didn't have that information when you were like 12, 10, 16, 21, 24, like even a year ago, you didn't have their experiences. So really acknowledging that, having that that we were vulnerable, or that I was vulnerable, that I was defenseless, that there was no other way to do it, that there was no other way to survive. And even if that doesn't match what masculinity is, what a male is, like man up, like all these things, is like, no, what in reality is that while connecting with all these parts and really acknowledging and telling yourself and having this conversation like, oh, you know what, like, thank you. I know that it maybe for my present self is not the best path to take, but thank you so much, because still here. Thank you so much for all the sacrifice that you have done. Thank you so much for all the pain that you have held. And I think that has helped me a lot, to be honest, and to really always remind myself that I don't know, like I'm just another man, another dude like around the world. Like I like going to parties. I like spend time with friends. I like video games. I like napping. I like do all these things that I'm like, well, yes, I'm still a human. And like even if masculinity is trying to isolate me from community, from other males, like to say that the world is scary and I should be like this wild beast, like furious, like biting and destroying everything around me. The reality is that no, I have fought already masculinity by surviving in this world.
Yeah, I love the message to the younger child. I think it's easy to think about the position your younger self may have been, like you said, from today with all the information and knowledge you have, and I should have done this, I should have done that. That was so stupid, and hindsight's 2020. But to really position yourself back to that period, minus all of the experience and knowledge and that you've collected over the years, is so important. And like you said, the fact that you're here today listening means your younger self, the child version of yourself, was completely successful in getting you here. That was the only job that your younger self had. And it's an emotional concept, right? Because I think there's so much judgment and we're so harsh to the younger version of ourselves for mistakes that were made along the way and the million things you would have done differently. But just the fact of being here means your younger self was successful. And so I think compassion is the key thing, to just take a look at your younger self and just feel the compassion towards that smaller version of yourself that was just doing the best they could with the information they had. So it's such a powerful message to share. And I know we're coming up on time, so I just want to check in if there's anything that you want to add that we might have missed, or any other messages that you want to add to share with the audience.
I think that I just want to remind all men that are watching this that you're worthy, regardless your experiences, that you deserve acceptance, support, that you deserve a safe space to explore who you are. I know that it's hard. I know that a lot of times the world is very unfair to us. It's the only thing that it has really put in front of us is that by only power dominance, stepping on other people is the only way to thrive. But it's time for us to break that pact with masculinity. And it's really time to take that power out from masculinity and really embracing it ourselves. Being vulnerable, ask for support, and recognize that you need that support is totally a thing that a male will do.
Yeah. I can't think of a better message to end with, that you're worth it. And I think another way to frame like the seeking for help is that it's really a superpower to have peers and community and feeling authentic and having a space where you can explore who you are on a deeper level. So I think it's really just supercharging yourself and a superpower it's not just you alone. It's bringing in other people. So absolutely. I really appreciate the time, and so glad we had our conversation, and I think it's going to be really impactful.
No, my pleasure. And I hope that everyone enjoyed it.
Yeah. So what do you think it means to be a good man?